But we're going to start with Facebook. The stock is down more than 2% today, now down 16% since the start of September, and one of the biggest laggards on the NASDAQ 100 this morning. And there's been a fire report just out from Bernstein. It calls the stock, quote, the internet's third rail, posing the question, is Facebook investable? The analyst behind that note is Mark Shmulik, who joins us now. Mark, thanks for talking to us today. Now, you have a buy rating on Facebook, despite laying out all of these various challenges, including challenges targeting advertising, regulatory overhang. Why do you have a buy rating on this stock?
Yeah, there's certainly a lot going on with Facebook right now, and it's one of those kind of emotional topics, kind of just like religion and politics. And aside from, I guess, a lot of the rhetoric around the name, there's obviously a lot of fundamental questions with the IDFA impact coming in this quarter, regulatory overhang, engagement questions. Why I continue to like it is, despite all of the noise, as we look ahead into 22, there's actually a lot to like about this story. User engagement's actually quite strong. Advertisers continue to stick around and invest. And we have many new initiatives coming online next year, particularly Shops, which should start monetizing in July of next year, which really gives the story a leg up once we get past this kind of negative media cycle that we're in today.
Well, Mark, certainly there have been negative media cycles in the past, but there is a question about whether this whistleblower meeting with the oversight board could really force major changes in terms of the way Facebook works and its ability to monetize its users. Do you consider that a real risk now?
I don't. I'm still waiting for details on what some of these larger changes might actually look like, because at the moment, it's mostly about levying lots of complaints against the company, but not much discussion has really been spent around what resolution looks like. And we look at kind of at the fundamentals that matter. Facebook's investing in moderation more than any other company in the space. It certainly put the oversight board there to begin with. It doesn't want to be in the moderation business. It certainly continues to push the privacy bar on advertising. There's talk about introducing new ad product that's effectively privacy first. So to me, when I look at it from an investor lens, engagement is strong. They're really kind of trying to cater to advertisers. And when I look at much of, kind of the complaints levied against Facebook, they don't appear to be Facebook issues. They're social media or internet issues more broadly. And so when I look at actually what can actually change with regards to some of the proposed about breakup, et cetera, Facebook actually quietly kind of filed to dismiss really the only antitrust suit that's on the table, which is the FTC suit against them, that I would actually argue is quite weak. So kind of from a pure fundamental basis, I don't see actually a lot of risk in the midterm.
Interesting. As it is down to 317, certainly something's getting priced in. Mark, stay with us. We want to bring in angel investor Jason Calacanis of Inside.com, talk about his thesis around Facebook. And Jason, I'll just start with you and ask you whether or not you think it's investable.
Thanks for having me, Carl. Nice to see you, John and Julia. We've got a long history in this company of getting penalties and the company growing. So if you're looking at historically, absolutely buy the stock when bad news comes up, because it's gone from 50 to 100, and now it peaked at, I think, $1 trillion, just over $1 trillion valuation. So historically, that's correct. So now what we have to wonder is this the straw on the camel's back here? Because there is something about kids and body dysmorphia issues and, this research that feels qualitatively different this time. Cambridge Analytica, a little hard to understand. The Beacon penalty they got, back in, what was that, 2012? That was, ages ago. Even the $5 billion fine they got in 2019, none of this has changed their behavior. But this one feels different. And I think if you look at the proposals they're putting up of how to deal with it, those also seem different. For the first time, we're hearing Facebook say things like, hey, maybe we'll age gate the service. Maybe we won't let certain ages here. Maybe we'll give parents control over their kids' accounts. Oh my God, maybe we'll even put time limits on this thing. So that could lead to headwinds. The death by distraction theory, I think, is the one with the most credibility here of not to buy the stock.
Right.
There's a moral reason not to buy the stock, but the distraction, this will be on management and recruiting. That's going to be really hard. And there's a generation of people, I think, who maybe just don't want to work for this kind of company.
Maybe, but they also seem to continue to be able to hire. Zuckerberg's overall approval ratings, as seen in Glassdoor and places like that, still relatively high. I want your take on
probably based on the RSUs going up. If the RSUs are down and underwater, that could be different, right, John?
We'll see. We'll see what happens there.
No.
Maybe that
today's not a good day in
I
Menlo
want to
Park.
ask you about. What really sinks a company? Individual mistakes, it seems to me, aren't what tends to sink tech companies. It's more the wrong ideas that permeate the way they hire, the way they build product, the way they roll out services. Thus far, up to this point, with M&A, with product design, even though you might take issue with the results and the impact, Facebook has been right. Is there a signal that they're starting to be wrong?
Yeah, I think the signal that they could be wrong is going to be reflected in the stock price, which we're seeing today. And the way they've dealt with these issues has always been to brush them off. And let's face it, they've been very arrogant about it. They've basically, send out PR people and they don't actually take meaningful steps. The meaningful steps here, that we heard from the whistleblower were very, very moderate. But this could be a Microsoft moment where, they can't be as aggressive buying companies. We all saw what happened with Explorer and the entire antitrust there. I think Bill Gates got burned out by it. Management got burned out by it. They were distracted. So if there is a thesis to not buy the stock, I think the distraction thesis, the RSUs, their restricted stock units becoming worth less, and just having a hard time buying big innovative things and hiring. And if they didn't buy Instagram or WhatsApp, we would be talking and referring to Facebook as something very different than how we talk about it today. So long term, in the next couple of years, is the stock going to get crushed? I'm not so sure of that. I think this will take a long time to litigate. But 10, 20 years from now, could this be a company that has a hard time buying other big companies and innovating? Sure. Yeah, that seems quite possible.
Mark, we can talk a lot about whether or not you have a moral compunction against buying the shares or whether or not they're going to have a harder time recruiting. But in the end, isn't the only issue whether or not advertisers want to get placed next to this content? And I wonder, I've seen conflicting reports even today about whether advertisers are, in fact, pulling back on the margin.
Yeah, look, I don't think it's the only thing that matters, certainly. I mean, that's how they've built their business to date, but they're clearly looking to diversify into other parts of the business like e-commerce, like AR, VR, or metaverse, if we want to call it that. But it's certainly, if advertisers speak with their wallets, that would absolutely have an impact on how we view the company and its near to midterm prospects. We've seen ad boycotts, not just on Facebook, but we had them, last year on Facebook with regards to one of the Trump tweets where they chose not to moderate it, and we had that boycott. That really didn't have much of an impact. And I think when you're, really the lifeline of customer acquisition for something like 11 million businesses, they're not just going to switch that off because of potentially moral issues. Now, if it's certainly, I look at also from an investor lens, and investors need to make their own decisions on, their moral values and whether Facebook fits with that thesis or not, which I'm sure every advertiser goes through as well. But, it's certainly something that matters. It's very important, but I wouldn't say it's the only thing.
Yeah, Mark, it'll be interesting to see how the risk of a boycott layers in with the targeting concerns pegged to that Apple operating system change. But Jason, I want to go back to you and I want to bring up something that your friend and fellow podcaster David Sachs said on our air on TechCheck yesterday. He said that the focus on and the potential harm of Facebook's algorithm has been completely blown out of proportion, and that the algorithm actually gives users more choice, not less. How do you respond to him?
Yeah, I think, he's presenting a kind of false dichotomy here that either we let it be a free speech free for all or the government is taking it over. Right. I heard the interview with my bestie Sachs. He was very positioned we're just giving the government control. No, there's a lot of steps along the way here, like the age gating or parents having control over their kid's account. Maybe it's for 16 years and above. Maybe they have an hour a day on the service. Maybe the parents could set that. Those are all more likely than the Congress or the president is going to run Facebook. That's kind of silly, all due respect to my bestie. And so I think the algorithm is important to be disclosed. And I think that's where we're going to get to is, hey, listen, if the algorithm is, and Facebook's best interest is to show you things that just basically go viral and go crazy. We all know that fake news and charged topics do that. And even Facebook is saying that it does that, and they want to show you more of your friends and interests. And Twitter actually did that. Remember, just in the past year, we've seen Twitter tell you, oh, you're into venture capital. Oh, you're into the Knicks. We'll show you more Knicks. We'll show you more venture capital. And we're all starting to see accounts maybe we don't follow that are more about our passions and interests as opposed to polarized political stuff. And, in terms of just some little anecdotal evidence, we were sitting here 2 or 3 years ago saying Facebook was going to be the new money. They were going to be the new Bitcoin. They have this Libra project. And, I think the distraction theory of like death by distraction, Libra is the perfect example. Where's Libra? When's the last time Zuckerberg discussed talking about taking over our monetary supply? I think the company is in the crosshairs and they've got such a spotlight on them. It's going to make them not make big, bold decisions. Same thing you saw with Amazon and Microsoft. Is Amazon really going to buy a $100 billion company? They tucked in Whole Foods, but they might not be able to tuck in Whole Foods today in this climate.
That's true. They are still hiring a whole bunch of people and working on AI, though. But point taken on that. And so, Mark Shmulik, can you put some numbers to that? Are you factoring in things like Libra and crypto plans being pushed out, the ways that Facebook might be hesitant to be aggressive in ways that they have in the past? Slow down an M&A. Is that in your model as a bear case? And if so, what does that do to the stock?
Yeah, we certainly factor it in, especially the lack of M&A, as Jason alluded to. It's one of the primary ways Facebook has grown to date. And even Giphy, the small application, is still very much stuck in the UK CMA, and they're having a tough time getting that through. So it's certainly baked in terms of where does growth come from? How do you drive further engagement? As typically acquisition's been a way to drive it in the past. Now, are we factoring in, ancillary revenues from things like payments, Libra, et cetera? Mostly not. The only one that we are actually baking into our model is e-commerce related revenues as they've built up shops. And, what we know as of now, starting in July next year, they'll be charging a 5% take rate for the most part on sales tied to shops. So that is something that we factored, and that feels like a more near-term real revenue that we can look at as a new revenue stream, non-advertising. That we do bake into a model. But outside of that, everything tied to kind of Libra, AR, VR, et cetera, we really haven't. It's what, we don't really want to count chickens before they hatch here.
Hey, Jason, I'm curious to know, short of any large-scale M&A, what to you would signify the all clear to go long these shares, where you come in and say yum yum on Facebook once again?
Yeah, I mean, I sold mine at 110 because I just couldn't stomach being a shareholder in the company given their behavior. But, I think if you saw behavior from them that looks responsible and maybe not attacking the messenger, releasing all the research and saying, here's our algorithm, here's how it operates. And we're going to take some short-term hits here in changing that algorithm. And here's the parental controls. Actual behavior. With Facebook, it's very important to look at their actual behavior, and their behavior, whenever they hit a fork in the road, they pick the decision that grows the business, not that's in the best interest of society, voting, the search for truth, people's best interest in mental health. They've always taken the wrong path. And so if we actually saw behavior, not talk, not, being pulled before Congress or the Senate, like if we actually saw them change the product a little bit, and that would be to me a signal that maybe they're being more responsible, and then maybe they would be allowed to do more bold projects or M&A. So that to me is the key. And you just haven't seen it, except for, I will give them credit that, Mossari from Instagram was like, hey, maybe we'll age gate the service or put timeouts on it, or maybe give parents some controls. And I would look very specifically at, can the parents turn off a child's Instagram account? Do they say, Instagram's for 15 and above, 16 and above, 17 and above? Did they do something really concrete like that? That would be, and them shutting off Instagram Kids, I don't give them any credit for that. The only reason they turned that off is because they got called out on it. And that's the nature of this company. They'll make the wrong decision. They'll go for growth. They'll behave badly until somebody says, no, you can't do that. And I think that's why people are getting frustrated with them.
Well, Jason, you've just sort of laid out what you would want to see in order to be bullish on this company long term. But I have to ask what you think is actually going to happen, and whether now you think the whistleblower talking to the oversight board could be the moment that actually drives change in the kind of behavior that you are hoping to see here.
Yeah, I'm reticent to think that this is the turning point, even though it feels different, because I think, as long as Zuckerberg's running the company, they're going to make bad decisions for society, and they're going to make great decisions for themselves. And so I don't like to touch the company and be involved in it, just because I find their approach to building product to be a bad one for society. And it does feel different this time, but we've said that before. When we saw this huge $5 billion fine and the FTC is after them again for the second, the third time, Cambridge Analytica, we keep thinking that something will change Zuckerberg's behavior. And the fact is, he controls the company. The governance of the company is Zuckerberg. He's going to do what he wants, and what he wants to do is just grow the business. And I think he's got a very cavalier attitude about it. The fact that he's out sailing and, I don't know if you saw him making fun of like journalists because they got his wave board incorrect, in terms of what kind of make it was. It's just, he doesn't take it seriously. And, for me, maybe he gets burnt out of dealing with this and being the most hated guy, in the technology space, and changes his behavior. But I haven't seen it, and I'll believe it when I see it.
Well, Zuckerberg is a controlling shareholder of the company. We can't forget that. But Mark, I want to give you the final word here. How do you respond to Jason's concerns and criticism of the company?
Yeah, look, I'll respectfully disagree. I think what we forget is, Cambridge Analytica was a big thing until it wasn't. And recent data suggests that a lot of the media headlines were overblown on what it actually was. We look back at, the algorithm change in late 2018. And, I remember seeing a company presentation at that time that says, the worst thing that we've seen that affects mental behavior is lurking on the platform. And so what we see drives engagement is posts from people that Now, look, certainly engagement's still the North Star. We shouldn't forget that. But part of what allowed them to change the algorithm to begin with was this idea that, engagement from friends and family actually improves your mental behavior. Now, what we obviously don't know is the kind of unintended consequences of any changes that we make. And I think we're seeing that kind of laid out in the most recent iteration. But I think it's unfair to say that they haven't been proactive, that they don't care about it. I think, in their view, it's a noble quest to connect the world, but it's also unprecedented. No one's tried it before. No one's done it before. And so we're kind of learning as we go. And every time we try to change it, or they try to change it, we may end up in a situation with more unintended consequences. There's we talk about the oversight committee. It's something Facebook's been asking for and set up themselves because they don't want to be in the moderation business. They don't want to be making decisions on, what types of content, who can post and where and when. What they really want to do is really simple, which is, hey, let's just connect the world. And we can argue whether that's, good for society or not.
It is a responsibility for sure. It just depends on how they want to handle it. We're going to watch it closely as we bounce off the 200 day today. Jason, Mark, thanks so much, guys. Appreciate it.
Great.
Cheers, Nim. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.